You are not a teenager anymore. You have not been one for years, maybe decades. You eat reasonably well, you wash your face, you sleep, most nights at least, and yet somehow, at 30, 40, or even 50 years old, you are still breaking out. Or you started breaking out again after years of clear skin, and nobody has given you a satisfying explanation for why. The standard answer you probably received was stress, or diet, or sensitive skin. And while none of those are completely wrong, they are nowhere near the full picture. Because adult acne, which now affects an estimated 50% of women and 25% of men over the age of 25, is not a skin problem. It is a hormonal, inflammatory, and biological problem that happens to show up on your skin. Your skin is not breaking out randomly. It is responding to a precise chain of internal events involving your hormones, your gut, your immune system, and the microscopic ecosystem living on your face right now. Every pimple is the end result of a process that began deep inside your body, often weeks before anything appeared on the surface. In this video, we are going to trace that entire chain from the inside out. By the end, you will understand exactly why adult acne happens, why it often gets worse with age rather than better, and what the science actually says about addressing it at the root. Let's begin at the foundation, because most people have a fundamental misunderstanding of what a pimple actually is. And that misunderstanding leads directly to treating the wrong thing. Your skin contains millions of hair follicles, tiny shafts that run from the surface down into the deeper layers of the skin. Each follicle is connected to a sebaceous gland, an oil-producing gland that secretes a waxy substance called sebum. Sebum is not the enemy. It is a sophisticated biological lubricant designed to protect the skin barrier, retain moisture, and carry dead skin cells up and out through the pore to the surface. When this system works correctly, sebum flows upward, exits through the pore, and the follicle stays clear. A pimple forms when this process breaks down at one or more points simultaneously. The first disruption is called hyperkeratinization, an abnormal buildup of dead skin cells inside the follicle wall. Instead of shedding normally, these cells clump together and begin blocking the channel. Sebum continues to be produced, but can no longer exit efficiently. It begins accumulating behind the blockage. This creates what dermatologists call a microcomedone, a microscopic plug that is the starting point of every single pimple, weeks before anything visible forms on the surface. At this stage, a bacterium called Cutibacterium acnes, which lives naturally on all human skin, begins feeding on the trapped sebum. As it multiplies, the immune system detects the bacterial activity and sends inflammatory signals to the area. The follicle wall becomes inflamed, swells, and eventually forms a whitehead, a blackhead, or a deeper inflammatory lesion, depending on how far below the surface the process occurs. Now, here is where adult acne separates itself completely from teenage acne, and why treating them the same way produces such poor results. Teenage acne is primarily driven by a surge in androgens, the group of hormones that includes testosterone, which occurs during puberty. This surge dramatically increases sebum production across the entire face, which is why teenage acne tends to be widespread, oily, and centered on the forehead and nose. Adult acne follows a completely different hormonal pattern. The primary driver is not a surge, but a shift, a gradual change in the ratio and sensitivity of hormones that is often invisible on standard blood tests, because the absolute levels may appear normal while the cellular response has changed. In women, even a modest increase in androgen activity within the technical normal range can trigger excess sebum production in genetically sensitive follicles. This is why adult female acne clusters along the jawline, chin, and lower face. The follicles in this region have a higher density of androgen receptors, meaning they respond more aggressively to hormonal fluctuation. In adult men, testosterone decline combined with increased conversion to dihydrotestosterone, a more potent androgen, can paradoxically increase sebum production in certain follicles, while overall hormone levels appear to be dropping. Research suggests this conversion process, driven by an enzyme called 5-alpha reductase, is significantly more active in the follicles of adults who develop late-onset acne. Let's move to the factor that most adults with persistent breakouts have in common, and it has nothing to do with skincare products. When your body encounters stress, whether psychological, physical, or inflammatory, your adrenal glands release cortisol, the primary stress hormone. Cortisol is essential for survival, but it also directly stimulates sebaceous glands to produce more sebum, increases systemic inflammation, and disrupts the hormonal balance that keeps follicle clearing functioning normally. Under acute short-term stress, cortisol spikes and then falls. The skin responds temporarily and recovers. Under chronic low-grade stress, the kind that most adults carry continuously from work pressure, poor sleep, and constant digital stimulation, cortisol remains persistently elevated at a level too low to feel dramatic, but high enough to continuously stimulate sebum production and suppress immune regulation in the skin. Cortisol also disrupts the gut microbiome, the community of bacteria living in your digestive system, which in turn affects the skin through what scientists call the gut-skin axis. When gut bacteria are disrupted, inflammatory compounds produced in the intestine can reach the bloodstream and ultimately affect sebaceous gland activity and skin barrier function. Studies suggest that adults with persistent acne show measurably different gut microbiome profiles than those with clear skin, even when their diets are similar. No topical product addresses the cortisol sebum inflammation loop. This is why adults who treat their acne exclusively with external creams and cleansers frequently experience partial improvement that never fully resolves. What you eat does affect your skin, but not in the way most people think, and not through the foods most people suspect. The connection between diet and acne is not about greasy food making your skin greasy. That is a myth with no scientific support. The actual mechanism runs through insulin, the hormone your pancreas releases in response to blood sugar rising after you eat carbohydrates. When you consume high glycemic foods, foods that cause a rapid spike in blood sugar, your body releases a large pulse of insulin. Insulin directly stimulates the sebaceous glands through the same receptor pathway as androgens and triggers the release of a growth factor called IGF-1, which further amplifies sebum production and promotes the abnormal skin cell shedding inside follicles that creates blockages. The foods driving this response most powerfully are not what most people expect. It is not fried food or chocolate. It is refined carbohydrates, white bread, white rice, sugary drinks, and processed snack foods. Dairy, particularly skim milk, has also shown a consistent association with acne across multiple studies, likely because milk contains IGF-1 and androgen precursors regardless of whether it is organic or not. Here is something that fundamentally changes how you should think about your skin. Your face is not just skin, it is an ecosystem. The surface of your skin hosts hundreds of bacterial species that form a complex living community called the skin microbiome. In a balanced state, this ecosystem actively protects you. Beneficial bacteria regulate pH, strengthen the skin barrier, and keep Cutibacterium acnes populations controlled at a level that does not trigger inflammation. The problem is that most conventional acne treatments are profoundly disruptive to this ecosystem. Antibacterial cleansers, benzoyl peroxide, and broad-spectrum antibiotics do not selectively eliminate acne-associated bacterial strains. They eliminate most species indiscriminately, creating a void that is frequently repopulated by more disruptive communities. Repeated antibiotic use for acne, while effective short-term, is associated with higher rates of recurrence and increasingly resistant bacterial strains over time. Over-cleansing and harsh products also strip the protective acid mantle, a thin film that keeps the skin's pH slightly acidic and inhospitable to pathogenic bacteria. When the acid mantle is disrupted, the skin compensates by producing more sebum, feeding directly back into the blockage cycle. One of the most significant shifts in dermatology research over the past decade is the recognition that the skin and gut are in constant two-way communication. When the gut microbiome is disrupted by chronic stress, antibiotics, low-fiber diets, or excess sugar, increased intestinal permeability can develop. Inflammatory molecules enter the bloodstream, reach the sebaceous glands, increase their androgen sensitivity, and disrupt the follicle clearing process. Research shows adults with acne have measurably higher rates of digestive symptoms and altered gut bacterial profiles compared to clear-skinned control groups. Probiotic interventions have shown significant reductions in inflammatory acne lesions through gut-targeted rather than skin-targeted treatment, a possibility that conventional dermatology has been slow to incorporate into standard care. Now let's address something most dermatology content skips: the cases where adult acne is not a skin issue at all, but a visible symptom of an underlying hormonal condition. The most important of these is polycystic ovary syndrome, PCOS, affecting an estimated 10 to 15% of women of reproductive age. PCOS involves chronically elevated androgen levels, disrupted ovulation, and insulin resistance. Persistent inflammatory acne along the jawline is frequently the first visible symptom, often appearing years before other signs become apparent. If adult female acne is cyclical, clearly worsening in the week before menstruation, this pattern points strongly toward progesterone and estrogen fluctuation and is responsive to specific hormonal interventions that have no effect on non-hormonal acne. In adults of any sex, sudden onset acne without a clear lifestyle explanation warrants evaluation of adrenal function, thyroid hormones, and insulin sensitivity. Insulin resistance is significantly more common in adults with persistent acne than in the general population, and addressing it produces improvements that topical treatments alone cannot replicate. Acne that is deep, cystic, and painful along the jaw and neck in women, particularly if accompanied by irregular periods, hair thinning at the crown, or excess facial hair, is a cluster of symptoms suggesting androgen excess and should not be treated as a cosmetic issue. Let's bring everything together. Adult acne is a multi-system condition driven by hormonal signaling, chronic inflammation, gut microbiome disruption, and insulin sensitivity, with external skincare being only one small part of the equation. Treating it exclusively from the outside is the equivalent of disconnecting a smoke alarm rather than addressing the fire. What the research consistently supports: a low glycemic diet produces measurable reductions in acne lesions independently of topical treatment. Stress management that genuinely reduces cortisol through sleep, movement, and nervous system recovery addresses the sebum inflammation loop at its source. Gut microbiome support through dietary fiber, fermented foods, and reduced antibiotic exposure reaches the skin from the inside in ways topical products cannot. For skincare specifically, the science supports simplicity over complexity. A gentle non-stripping cleanser, a non-comedogenic moisturizer to support the barrier, and targeted active ingredients rather than layered aggressive treatments that further disrupt the microbiome. And for those whose acne is cyclical, jawline dominant, and resistant to everything else, that pattern is a biological signal pointing toward a hormonal evaluation, not a personal failing or a skincare problem. Your skin has been trying to tell you something. Now you know how to listen.